welcome back to the channel. When I last left you, our men of the 2nd King's German Legion are occupying Haye Sainte, about 400 or 500 of them. And the first French attack is about to begin. The men have erected a barricade, which is a generous term for this piece of garbage that they put up there. They dragged a few broken down cannons, some farm equipment, and made a barricade. Earlier in the morning, a bunch of British light dragoons actually rode past Haye Sainte and destroyed the barricade. That's how useless it was. But it was quite good cover, as we'll find out later. And so there are something people don't understand about Haye Sainte, and something I didn't understand. I don't want to act like I'm above anybody. I generally did not know this stuff either. Haye Sainte was an active defense. It wasn't just a courtyard defense. The barricade was manned with KGL troops. The garden kitchen was manned. The orchard was manned. The sandpit nearby was manned with the 95th. The actual farmhouse itself was sort of like a last, the farmhouse itself was almost like a citadel. It was almost like a, have you seen the movie Zulu? You know, when the Zulus swarm over the walls, they all retreat to the sandbag redoubt. It's almost like that with the farmhouse. If the fighting is actually happening in the farmhouse, that's not good. So the attack starts. The French come on and they hit Haye Sainte with everything. Napoleon had first thought of bombarding Haye Sainte, but it was decided that that artillery bombardment would take too long. You couldn't get rid of it, and besides, if you actually destroy Haye Sainte, you remove its value as a, the French would also like to get men in there and defend that against any potential counterattacks. So a decision is sort of at some point. I'm not sure if it's the first or second attack. It's not very clear. A cannon is brought to Haye Sainte, and a cannon is used at point blank range. Don't use cannons at point blank range, or point blank, being about 200 yards, 200 meters. Don't use cannons 200 meters away from riflemen, because what happened will happen. The KGL simply just murdered the people running the cannon, and it left, or they did. They shot some of them, and then the rest left, as you do. You don't want to die. And the French came on. Now immediately, the men in the orchard, including Bowring himself was in the orchard, they found that the orchard was not actually a good place to be. Trees, when we see wargaming terrain, we think, oh, trees, the +1 cover. Orchards aren't really that good. The thin, spindly little trees, I believe this is in the it's European summertime. But, these spindly little trees, they won't really give much cover. So Bowring and the men in the orchard are eventually orderly pushed back into the field near the orchard. So they're in the orchard. That's quite a few men. I believe 2 companies are in there. So we're talking about 120 men sort of moved from the orchard into the field. The orchard itself sort of remains unoccupied for the rest of the battle. It's almost like a no man's land for the rest of the battle because it's pretty much useless. The French assault the main gate. This is where Lieutenant Villeneuve comes down with his axe, and he, famously, there's a picture of him from Warlord's collector set. He hacks at the front gate with his axe, and then he's shot dead. And then another man picks up the axe and hacks at the gate, and he's shot dead. And the engineer attack on the main gate is repulsed. This first attack was really a big deal. Like, the French just thought they could sweep past these Germans. The Germans had rifles. The KGL had rifles, but for the first attack they sort of held back. They didn't take a lot of long range shots, but they had murderous short range firepower with these things. You couldn't reload them fast, but you were murderously accurate. Not super accurate, nothing like a Martini Henry accuracy or something like that, but you could hit a man at like 100, at sort of 50 feet very consistently with a rifle. And these things were murderous. And so the loopholes were firing. Men were up on the piggery and the stable roof. It was actually quite a good defense. There's one man who is sort of like the battalion sniper. His name is Mueller. You could also pronounce it Muller, but Mueller is probably the safest way to pronounce that name nowadays. So Mueller and 2 riflemen are on the roof, and these riflemen are loading for Mueller. So Mueller essentially has 180 rounds of sniper ammunition. And since I am a skirmish wargame player, I think that this battle is a great representation of sharp practice. So Mueller can be seen as our marksman, which you can purchase for some command points. And so we have this marksman Mueller, and his job is to shoot enemy officers, and he does that brilliantly. But more about him later. So the orchard's under attack. They've been sort of moved out. The main gate's under attack, but they've held it off. The walls themselves come under attack. They deal with it. The 95th come under attack in the sandpit. We're not really looking at the sandpit. The men at the kitchen garden are under attack. They actually have a hedge that sort of shelters most of them. They really only have one way you can get to them, and it's quite a well defended area. And there's actually a corporal with 10 men guiding this tiny hedgerow, and they sort of like a pretty thick, substantial hedge. So there's only one way through it, and he and 10 men basically used the rolling around on the ground, doing sort of your classic light infantry tactics to defend this hedgerow. And so all these attacks come on, and it's all right, and it's doing quite well, until the unit that's going to really, really make life hard for the British turn up: the French cuirassiers. Cuirassiers, if you want to be French. The unit that's going to plague our defenders of La Haye Sainte turn up: the French cuirassiers. Cuirassier here, they wear a cuirass, a cuirass. That's where they get their name, funnily enough. They actually come out and they advance upon the men in the field, the men who were in the orchard, including Baring. I'm not sure if it was von Baring at this point. Anyway, they attack Baring, and Baring and his officers start screaming, "Form square." Unfortunately, they are not heard, and they're smart enough, and their men are well trained enough that before they get in serious trouble, they write, "Look, those cavalry are about 200 feet away. We can't form a square with the men we have in the time we have. Run." Okay, and they retreat to a nearby battalion, and that battalion had actually been ordered up in response to the attack on La Haye Sainte. So this battalion had come forward to help relieve La Haye Sainte. So there's not enough time to form a square. They can't really go anywhere, so they look around, and where do they see? Well, they see the brigade. So our man Baring and a good part, probably about 2/3 of the King's German Legion occupying La Haye Sainte, are now trapped outside La Haye Sainte under cavalry attack. Saw von Ompteda leading his brigade towards La Haye Sainte, and they made a beeline for von Ompteda's brigade and managed to shelter with his squares. So von Ompteda, I haven't mentioned him in this situation. What was going on? Well, von Ompteda had been ordered forward. There were other brigades ordered forward too, but von Ompteda is the one we're going to look at. He was ordered forward with the 1st Light KGL, the 5th Line KGL, and the 8th Line KGL. He was ordered forward to relieve La Haye Sainte, essentially to move in support of La Haye Sainte. And what happened was, the cuirassiers who were harassing Baring were then turned their attention to Ompteda, or they were threatening Ompteda as well. They weren't really going after Baring's men, they were sort of more going after Ompteda's reinforcements. And Ompteda ordered men form square, and the 5th, which is the one we're going to look at, formed square, and the 1st formed square, but the 8th was actually caught in line and destroyed. Again, destroyed doesn't mean wiped out, but men were killed, quite a lot of men were killed, and the battalion ceased to function as a fighting unit. So von Ompteda shelters in this brigade square with the 5th, and a brigade square just means 2 battalions forming a square. And von Baring and almost all of his men make it to the square. The only ones who don't make it actually back into La Haye Sainte itself. La Haye Sainte at this point has about 50 people defending it. So down from about 300 to 50, or sort of 400, 300, 400. So down from 400 to about 50. This is the worst it ever gets until it gets bad. This is the worst it gets until it's absolutely untenable. If the French really storm forward now, they'll take La Haye Sainte. If the French come forward now, they'll take it. Fortunately, 2 things happen. The first, the 5th Division under General Picton is ordered forward. This is why Ompteda was ordered forward as well. The 5th Division under General Picton was ordered forward. So let's see the video of that.
Ireland's brigade is broke. Plug the gap, if you please. Now's the time for the heavy cavalry, I think.
By all means, sir.
Thank you, Sir Arthur Wellesley. Now, unfortunately, something else then happened with General Picton's division. Let's take a look at that.
On, you drunken rascals! You horse melts! You thieves! You blackguards!
Oops. He was not shot through the top head, but he was actually shot in the face. But anyway. So, the 5th Division's attack has sort of been stalled / broken up. It still sort of came on, but it wasn't fantastic. Von Ompteda is now pinned down by the cuirassiers. He will spend the rest of the battle pinned down by cuirassiers. So essentially, he's playing rock, paper, scissors with Ney, d'Erlon, and the artillery. So for those who don't know, put a thing up here. To form a square, you become a very good target for infantry and artillery, but you become impervious to cavalry. In line, cavalry will absolutely murder you unless you are the 28th. I have a video on them. Oh, they're in my part 2 of my rambling video. Check them out. The 28th, they managed to actually hold up to a cavalry charge to the front. Literally the only exception of the entire period. Line versus cavalry get killed. So you have to play rock, paper, scissors, or rock, scissors, or whatever. So you need to move in line, fight infantry in line. Also, you want to move in column, fight infantry in line, and deal with cavalry in square. So, and you have to be lucky every single time. The French only have to get lucky once. One of their attacks just has to find you in the wrong formation, and they'll cut you to pieces. The Germans have to get lucky every single damn time, and they do. Besides the 8th, the 5th basically is advancing. For the rest of this battle, the 5th is going from square to line to get closer to La Haye Sainte and provide support. The 1st KGL sort of retreats to a sunken road where they provide long-range covering fire. They, of course, have rifles. The 5th are actually a redcoat regiment without rifles. So, the French are coming on, and d'Erlon's corps is coming up the centre. So what does Wellington do? Well, let's find out.
Now, Scots Greys! Now!
That's right, the Union Brigade charges forward. Now, the Union, it's called the Scots Greys in the movie. The Scots Greys were definitely a part of the Union Brigade. It was called the Union Brigade because it had Irish, Scottish, and an English regiment. I'll put those up on the screen here. I think it was the Royal Irish Dragoons, Scots Greys, and then a Lifeguards. With the 3 Lifeguards and Horse Guards are the same, different things. Sorry, not the same thing. Horse Guards sort of ran the army for most. Anyway, so the Union Brigade charged, and they did what British cavalry always do, which is screw everything up. Wellington famously said in the Peninsula that he would match a single British cavalry squadron against 2 French cavalry squadrons, but he would not even think about matching 4 against 4, because the British cavalry had zero discipline at all. Well, they had very poor discipline. They were incredibly zealous. They were incredibly arrogant. They were incredibly prone to overcharging. So this happened at, I believe, Salamanca as well. That might have been Spanish, but the same sort of thing happened. The cavalry came on, and they hit the enemy, and they drove them off. And normally what you'd want to do with the cavalry is like, okay, we drove the enemy off, retreat, and then we'll do that again. That's not what British cavalry do. British cavalry are so impetuous, they just kept charging. And that's what they did at Waterloo. They charged, they pushed d'Erlon's corps back, and they just kept going. And they hit the French cannons, and they caused some problems there, and then they got massacred by French lancers and stuff.
Look out on the left!
We actually see in the movie Major General Ponsonby. That's who that is. That's Ponsonby, for those who don't know. He is he's killed the way he is killed in real life. He's actually killed by lancers in mud. His father wasn't. That's just made up for that. That's like a foreshadowing thing for Waterloo. His father was actually, I believe, still alive or died peacefully at his time of his death. Ponsonby was actually the commander who took over from Uxbridge in the Peninsula after Uxbridge nailed Wellington's sister-in-law and then ran off with his brother's wife, leaving his own wife to divorce him. And so Uxbridge was actually despised by Wellington. He hated the man, which makes the end scene funny when Uxbridge gets his leg taken off with the cannonball and Wellington sort of looks at him and goes, oh, you have got your leg shot off, and serves you right too. Bit of a tangent there, sorry. So Ponsonby has been killed. The Union Brigade is shattered. It won't take any real part in the rest of the battle. And the main units operating around the La Haye Sainte area are King's German Legion Hussars and some British Dragoons. British have Hussars as well, but they also still have some Dragoons. The difference is a uniform difference. There's literally nothing different about them except Hussars are more expensive. Anyway. And von Ompteda's... the reason von Ompteda's 5th and 1st battalions were able to form line is because the KGL Hussars and some British Dragoons were actually able to cover them. Cavalry are a very effective screen against other cavalry. So what happens is the British cavalry could basically charge to intercept the French cavalry. And even if they didn't get there in time, you could sort of like maybe okay, so here's your infantry unit here. Sorry, I'm doing this in reverse. And your French cavalry are coming at them. If British cavalry suddenly start coming on from here, the French might veer away. they might veer towards them. They might even charge, and then your cavalry can hit them in the rear. It's all depends on the situation, but having your own cavalry is a very good defense against enemy cavalry. So, the cavalry have seen the enemy off from around La Haye Sainte. It's very hard for cavalry to operate around La Haye Sainte itself. So, outside of the cuirassiers charging, there's no real other events that happen. In the retreat from La Haye Sainte, another man we're going to look at, Lieutenant Graham, who is a Scotsman. You were allowed to be non-German and join the KGL. The official language is actually German, but most of the officers were German. Our man Graham jumps the wall, draws his sword, and gets a few men together, and they actually charge the barricade that they'd set up, which had been occupied by the French, and he charges the barricade and takes a lot of French prisoners. They are then given to some hussars who take them back to the main line. Then another man we're going to meet, Rifleman Lindau. He spies a French officer, and the book says he has a, quote, vendetta. This officer had a quite nice shiny gold watch, and he wore a pretty fancy looking uniform, and he looked like he had quite a bit of money on him. So our man Lindau, Private Lindau, shot this officer, and then Private Lindau managed to convince a whole bunch of his mates that it was a good idea to sally forth again because Graham had done it, so let's us do it too. And Lindau sallied forth, and the first thing he did was run over to this officer's dead body, made sure he was dead. Lindau actually left his own record, so he may have actually just finished him off a little bit. But anyway, that's the past. Lindau took the man's gold. Then he looked around, made sure there were no Frenchmen. Okay, his friend said, "All right, we're going back." And he said, "Okay, yeah, I'll be there in a second." Took the man's watch, took another watch that he had on him because apparently you need 2 watches. And then he was going for the ring on his finger. He couldn't quite get it off, and a bunch of French skirmishers come at him. And he drops the ring, grabs the money, grabs the watches, and starts running back to La Haye Sainte, much to the delight of everyone, skirmishers and his own side. He's running back, bullets are flying past his head, his friends are providing counterfire, and he actually gets back inside La Haye Sainte with his stolen gold. By this time, Barring and the other KGL have returned because it's now safe. And he walks up to Barring with his bag of money that he stole from a man he killed, and his necklace and a couple of chains, gold watches and things like that. And he says to Barring, "Would you mind holding on to these, please, sir? Things that I stole off a man that I murdered. Killed in combat, whatever. For the end of the battle, in case I lose him." And Barring basically looks at him and he says, "No, I'm not going to hold on to your stolen property. What are you doing? Go back over there and do something." And Lindau actually reluctantly stows these things in his person and goes away. So now what happens is the French come on again. Our man, Lieutenant Graham, is actually up on top of the piggery overseeing everything. And something happens here. Lindau turns to Graham, and this is a good representation of the attitude men had towards their officers. He says, "You better be careful, sir. They might shoot you up there." And Graham says, "Let the dogs try." And then he is immediately shot in the hand. Well, sometime in the next short period of time, he's shot in the hand. I'm saying it's his left hand. The book does not make clear, but since later on he uses a sword quite well, I'm saying that he was actually shot in the left hand. That's the best deductive reasoning I can come up with for that. Lindau basically then sort of, shuts up a little bit and goes back to fighting. He makes another attempt to try and have his personal booty stored with an officer, and then he is shot in the head. But I said he wrote a memoir. I said, he wrote about the event. Lindau was shot in the back of the head, and it blew some of his skull away. And Barring looked at him and he said, "Well, there you go. You can go back now." And he shook his head and he said, "No, I'm fine. I'm standing and fighting. I'm a man of the King's German Legion. I'm not going anywhere." And he got a bottle of rum, and he poured rum in the wound. I don't know why you shouldn't pour rum onto your brain. That's just don't put rum on your actual brain. Then he got a scarf, covered the scarf in rum, and wrapped it around his little headband, and kept fighting. And he turned up to, let's get the exact quote. He then turned to Graham and he made a little quiet remark. Lieutenant Graham then said to Lindau, "Well, there you go, you can go back now." And Lindau said, "So long as I can stand, I shall stay at my post." He was dedicated. The men of the King's German Legion, I'm not going to say they're very high morale. They do have very high morale, but that's not the thing we're talking about here. We're talking about dedication. Especially for Barring and the officers. Honour is a big part of why they don't abandon this post. For the men, well, their officers are fighting, so they're going to fight too, because they want to show that their officers that we're good men, we can follow you, we can fight. And if you're going to take the effort to fight beside us, we're going to follow you too. And this is what happens. And so this little exchange here between, okay, he says to the officer, "Hey, you better get down, you're going to get shot," jokingly. The officer then gets shot, and Lindau says to him, "Oh, you might as well go." And the officer says, "Well, I'm not going anywhere, it's only a bullet." Lindau then gets shot, and he says, "Right, you're not going away because you got shot. I'm not going away because I got shot." And I think that's the dichotomy we're looking at here. So, the second French attack on La Haye Sainte is about to begin. The British cavalry have seen off the first, but there's no one to save them now. Let's have a look at the second French attack on La Haye Sainte in the next episode, which you can find right here. Thank you very much for watching. Have a wonderful day.